Hello, Future Trinket here. Before this podcast starts proper, I just wanted to give a quick disclaimer. We intended to talk about ranking all the colors in EDH, but never actually got around to it because we just kind of kept arguing and yapping about different things. So when I say that in the actual intro, we never get there. Just wanted to clarify that we didn't forget, we just kind of ended up not making it there. So here's a bunch of disjointed arguments and a collection of us talking. Much thanks to the editor for making this listenable. Hello and welcome to the Magic Mirror podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Khan the Trinket Mage, and with me is my co-host, 33 Elk.
Hello.
Additionally, I have my co-host, Salubrious Snail.
Hello.
And today we have a guest, Commander Balmy.
Hi.
One more person to introduce. If you're watching this podcast or listening to it and it sounds different or looks different, we have a new editor. Before, these were all edited by me. He can introduce himself by putting his favorite Magic card on screen now. I don't know what it is, Spotify listeners. Sorry, it's probably Grolnock.
Everyone say thank you, Yusuf.
Thank you, Yusuf. Yeah,
Thank you,
everybody
Yusuf.
Thank you,
judge
Yusuf.
him in the comments.
Khan was sick of editing out my random noises I make constantly.
Yeah, this dude's always like drinking iced tea and clinking ice in the glass constantly. Last episode, like a faucet was turned on. Like I don't even know. There was
I don't
so
even-
much going on.
I felt like I was trying to be better last episode, so I don't even know how I was worse.
Oh, I just heard one.
Oh, that was me. That was me drinking water.
Oh, that wasn't
Oh,
you.
wow. God.
Unbelievable.
No. Sorry. To be clear, Snail and I both make a lot of weird noises that I have to edit out. Elk is the only one with like clean
I'm
audio.
perfect. I'm
Yeah.
amazing.
Today we have a fun podcast. We're going to be talking about which color in Magic we think is the quote-unquote, I'm using air quotes here that you cannot see, best in casual EDH. And we'll talk more about what that means and our definitions of that later on.
Do we also want to try and talk about what's worst?
Oh, yeah, we can
It's
also do
red?
what's worse.
I think we agree, luckily, on that one. That one will be quick. The
all-
best
I-
will be a little longer.
I have a defense prepared, I'll have you know.
Oh, okay.
Oh, the devil's advocate is here.
We'll get into the worst as well. But first, we need to thank our sponsor, Cardcastle. They're the easy way to sort your collection digitally. If you use our link in the description below, you will get 1 free month of premium. Thanks to Cardcastle for sponsoring the podcast. So before we jump into our main topic, I wanted to give Commander Balmy a chance to introduce himself.
Well, hello. I'm glad to be here. I am Bami. I've been making content on the internet for a very, very long time. Although I've only recently started with Magic. I kind of like used to do a lot of Dota stuff, but then kind of grew a little done with Dota, so now I'm doing other things. I'm also a game developer, released a couple of games, currently working on a couple of them. If you're ever curious about them, Boosted Survivors is on Steam, it's 99 cents, you just can have a look at that.
So do you still play Dota?
I haven't played it in like a month, so not really. I don't know. I've played like 17,000 hours of Dota, so
Wow.
Yeah.
it's just like eventually you get to a point where you don't hate the game or anything like that, where I'm just kind of like, no, I feel like I've beaten this, you know, like I'm just done. I'm finished.
I'm at a measly 2,300 hours, so not
Yeah.
nearly as much Dota as you.
It's just honestly, that's one of those games where if you haven't played 1,000 hours of it, I wouldn't even queue with you. I remember that was my
Yeah.
criteria. If you haven't played 1,000 games, if I couldn't see 1,000 games on your account, I wouldn't invite you to my party because you didn't have enough experience. So that's a little bit unhinged. So I'm
The
enjoying Magic.
supremacists. That compared to the world's most sane League of Legends player is like, I'm sure there's still like a valley between you two. Like you're still plenty more sane.
I've actually, oh my god, my audience, my old audience are gonna be so mad at me, but I've actually played a little bit of League of Legends recently because like my IRL friends play League and I was like, all right, I guess I'll play League with you. And I've just been spamming Pantheon and just bullying the top lane. That's been my life.
I recently went back and started playing some solo queue ranked games for Dota. Man, this game's so fun. I took like a many year break from it. Like basically all during college, I just didn't really play.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of getting back into it. I would play a lot with the guy who's editing this podcast. And he would constantly grief my lands. It's crazy.
Of
All
course,
right,
he would
guys,
grief
and I
your
say
life.
this with peace and love, but we are a Magic the Gathering podcast.
Yeah.
We can be an anything podcast if you want it to be.
Yeah, before we lose too many viewers. Well, glad to have you. I'll link to his channel, his Magic the Gathering channel will be in the description for anybody to check.
If you're ever interested in Dota though, then check out Stories of Dota. That's also my channel. And that one is very accessible even for people that don't know anything about the game.
Yeah, I've watched a couple of those videos. I played the game a little bit too, and I know some better through osmosis, but they're very well done videos.
Thank you.
Oh, why did I get you confused about someone else? Why did I think this wasn't you? Yes, I've seen your videos. I'm stupid.
Oh my god.
I've been around for a long time and I've made a lot of content. So like my stuff kind of permeates around the place, you know? So it's easy to get me mixed up with other things just because I've been in a lot of places, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think I got your channel confused with someone else's Dota channel. All right. Well, that's very cool. I loved your Meepo video. It's very good.
The most unhinged one of the bunch.
Yeah. I mean, I like Meepo. We need to stop. Sorry.
Yes, we need to
I'm
stop.
sorry.
Magic stuff.
Yeah, we gotta cut some of this crap. When we're talking about what is the best color for casual EDH, we have to define two words here, right? Which is best, or two terms, right? Best and casual EDH, right? Like, what are those two things in this context? Now, the four of us have varying opinions for all of these. So I think it would be best if we began sharing our opinions about one of those and then the other, and then we can talk about what we think is the best color.
I think it would be easiest to start with like the definition of best because I feel like that one is much more straightforward.
I agree.
So in my mind, if I may start, is to me, the best strategy just means the strategy that's most likely so that you win the game. Just that you walk away the winner of the match.
I think best can really expand beyond that though. Once we'll get into defining casual, but I feel like yes, winning is definitely part of that, but what I'm thinking of mostly is the diversity of strategy. How good is the card advantage and removal? Like, can I answer anything that I need to? These are the things that come to mind really, is a flexibility of the color and the tenacity of a color versus just like, can it win? I want to be able to play Magic even if I lose that game. I want to feel like I had a chance anyway as well, which, not every color can really deliver on.
So to continue this disagreement train, I think that both of those definitions are a little bit they're still a little bit too hard to define. Win rate, I think, is partially going to be related to what decks come into a game. So if you have a color that's generally producing better decks, but those decks are getting played against other kind of strong decks, then you're naturally going to have that win rate being lower than it would be if it was stomping on a bunch of upgraded precons or something. My preferred, and I don't even know that I like this definition, but I think the definition that I find the most kind of solid ground in, that it works to build off of, is the best color is the one where it is easiest to build a deck that does well. And I specifically think of in a mid-power pod. It's the color where it's easiest to build a deck that you can bring to a mid-power pod at your local game store and do pretty well. And easiest, I guess, from the point of just getting into EDH to winning. What's the shortest?
So in your mind, you would be okay with saying that like a deck can perform well and like be kind of proven to be strong even if it doesn't win.
Yeah, if it's playing against decks that are a handful of like very well-tuned decks and it's not winning games, that's a better deck than a deck that's stomping over some precons 60% of the time.
But I feel like you are now introducing the assumption that we need to define like what is a like well-tuned deck and so on, right? Like, because of course, if we're saying that a deck is strongest when it's pop stomping, then yeah, I mean, I guess that's true. Then at that point, the color actually doesn't really matter.
Yeah, so I think it'd be easier, if we had like a version of Commander where it's like randomized matchmaking, whenever a local game store pod launches, four random EDH players from everywhere are just thrown onto this table. If you had a whole bunch of that, I think you could get a pretty clear idea of win rates. You could get a pretty clear idea of kind of how well the average EDH deck performs. And I think that could even be a valid metric. How well does the average EDH deck in a completely randomized game do, although it's not wildly like tangible. I don't know, the kind of the process of decks finding their way to a game is definitely a layer of complexity that I don't fully know how to account for.
I want to derail our train of disagreeing to agree with Snail. I think he's kind of like right on the money. I would like define it as the best being the color that you are most likely to have some form of success or ability to do things within the game, not necessarily just win rate, especially because in theory, right, in Commander, right, in theory, unlike, any one-on-one game, your win rate, if everything is even, should be 25%. Supposedly will lose 75% of games. And even if your deck is overperforming by, 5% or whatever, you still lose 70% of games. So just pure win rate in a 4-player free-for-all is a little difficult to heavily rely on. I would say like, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I don't understand. I don't understand that reasoning, because like if 25% is our standard win rate for this, right? Couldn't we still say, okay, well, if your deck wins 30% of matches, then it's doing better, then it's stronger? Like, I don't see why the baseline win rate is at all relevant.
I guess I'm just clarifying that win rate doesn't mean wins games of Commander. But I guess you're right. I guess it doesn't. If we just have the baseline of 25, that's fine. I suppose.
Khan just got hit by a truth.
Yeah.
Can't even recover.
I suppose best meaning, what color allows you to do the most within the game, the most easily.
I feel like all colors can do a lot though in a game. Like if I take a lot of irrelevant actions, like does that mean I'm doing a lot?
Mono black enjoyers when an artifact stacks piece hits the board.
Yeah, I feel like not every color can do everything as easily as every other color.
Okay, but now you're including everything in the definition, right? Now you're saying that a color needs to do everything.
Term, right? So of course I'm going to add everything.
No, I don't think so. Like the whole point of the color pie is that not every color can do everything, right?
Correct.
So if we're saying that for a color to be best, it needs to be able to do everything, then I feel like that's kind of going against Magic's core design philosophy.
But in Commander, it is. See, unlike other unlike other formats, in Commander, flexibility has a lot more meaning than in other. Actually, sorry, quick question, because I know you're new to Magic content. Are you new to Magic? Like, what other formats have you played, or how long have you been playing Magic? I should have asked that at the start.
I've been playing Magic for around 2 years.
Okay. And do you play any formats other than EDH?
I have tried a bunch of other formats, but I didn't really like them very much.
Okay.
Yeah. There's this idea. I'm going to just kind of build off Khan really quick before handing the mic back. Since color identity exists in EDH, there has been, at least in recent years, a lot more color pie breaks. Just so that way monocolor players can have access to ways to deal with problematic permanents, even though they're not in those colors. So what comes to mind? Chaos Warp is like the first one that sort of comes to mind. Mono red shouldn't be able to deal with enchantments by the rules of Magic, right? It's a color pie break if they can deal with enchantments.
Yes.
Chaos Warp, by that definition, is a color pie break because this card can target any permanent, including enchantments, which is a design for Commander because mono red needs to be able to deal with a enchantment that says prevent all non-combat damage to you and creatures you control or whatever, right? From a white deck, right? If you're a burn deck, you're just bricked against that.
I think that's kind of true, but also the nature of Commander deck building. And I think Wizards of the Coast has kind of cultivated this, but it's such that you'll get like this strong option as like the best red enchantment rule. You'll get Chaos Warp, but then you'll also get kind of a gradually, dropping down levels of quality. You'll get like
Wild Magic Surge.
Wild Magic Surge, the one from Lost Caverns of Ixalan that starts with a Z that I can't remember.
Zip, zap, zoom.
Zoya is Justice or something.
Yeah, that one. You'll get gradually kind of stair stepping down in terms of like effectiveness cards where like yeah, sure, you can run like one card, and maybe if you have a lot of tutors that can be enough, but
Although
also
I do have to correct you, by the way, Zoya's Justice is only target artifact or creature.
wow, okay, so it's even more
This
limited
isn't
than
a
I thought.
braid variant.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and jumping back to like flexibility in Commander, because you have 4 opponents, your odds of hitting an artifact player, an enchantment player, a creature focus player, right, suddenly spike up way more than in any 1v1 format. So in Commander, the flexibility and the ability to deal with enchantments and artifacts and planeswalkers and creatures and all these different types is much more important than in other formats where the restrictions of the color pie are a little less relevant.
But I feel like now we have gone from being able to do everything to being able to remove everything. And isn't that something different?
Oh,
It's-
right? Because
it's
doing
so-
everything would
yeah,
include removing everything.
I think
Well,
removing
yeah, of
things
course,
is-
but like
Yeah.
being able to remove everything doesn't mean you can do everything.
When I think about, like, once again, going to my definition of best, removal is definitely part of that suite of like what makes a color very good, but also the advantage as well. For me, an opponent's permanent stopping me is a form of me losing advantage because it's blanking cards in my hand. Being able to answer that and get those cards back is just as important as like a color being able to produce advantage or produce tempo, right?
Yes, I agree.
Yeah,
Sure.
like so I think a diversity of being able to remove certain things is very important, because if a rest in peace is in play and I have a blood artist in my hand, I need to be able to remove that, or else my blood artist is a 0/1 with no text, right? So removal is incredibly important, because in some instances like that, it can be a way to actually play the game, where other colors you might feel locked if you can't answer that enchantment.
Yeah, but I don't. I feel like I'm not disagreeing with removal being important.
Yeah. What I'm saying is, like, when we're talking about what is best, I think flexibility is very important, and that includes in removal, and that includes in how you get advantage and etc.
like what if there's a deck that has a very strong proactive plan, and maybe its reactive plan is a little bit weaker, but the proactive plan is just so strong that the reactive plan doesn't quite matter as much. I feel like this wouldn't like fully account for that. Obviously, being able to remove things is important, but it's not everything.
Right. Well, that's why I'm saying
Can I-
best is ability to do all of the things in Magic, and all of the things being, well, any number of things, right? The color that's able to push into this and that and this and that, including removal, including card draw, including a proactive game plan, etc., etc.
Okay, so like most diverse, I guess, is what.
Yeah, that's what
you're-
I would say.
Is what we're
Yeah.
made. Is what you're thinking of when you think of
Yeah,
best.
I am also growing quite fond of Snail's definition of like ease of building. I think not only in terms of like a new player, but like as an experienced player, like how many tools does a color give you to win, and what is the diversity of those tools, and how fun are they, right? And fun's sort of subjective in that example, but still, like, diversity still matters in how a color wins, right? Red burns people, but you might have
But-
some more options in other colors and stuff.
But Alec, I feel like now you're talking yourself into agreeing with me that white is stronger than green.
Listen, I never said green or white was the strongest.
Ah, all right. Can I ask you guys a somewhat related question? I feel like this is just kind of useful context for, at the very least, me. And I'm just kind of curious, where do you guys play most of the time?
I play at a local game store.
Mm-hmm.
I specifically play at my local game store, Elysium Cafe and Games in Lakewood, Colorado. And I used to play at my old game store, which was in SoCal. Yeah, I typically just play at game stores.
Do you go there often?
Oh yeah, I go every week.
Nice.
I play typically a mixture of in my own kind of play group or couple different overlapping play groups, sort of, in my local game store. I think these days it's a little bit more of my local game store, but a mixture of the two. And my local game store, I typically play in the mid-power pods. They separated it out like mid-power, high-power, CEDH.
I used to play a lot with like a dedicated like friend group, especially in college. But then after like moving around a lot, don't really have any friends near me, so I just play at like local game stores. And I guess I also play with like random patrons and stuff. So yeah, that's right now what I'm doing mostly. Just like for the past couple of years, it's been like local game stores mostly.
All right. Yeah, for me personally, I tend to play, like, we have like a Magic club at the nearby university, which they somehow let me into, even though I'm not a student. And then also there's a local game store, and there's this like other community, which is in this like restaurant where they meet once a week, where I go occasionally. And I also like playing, like, I play a good amount on MTGO, just kind of like in addition to everything.
I remember going to the restaurants.
To me, this is just kind of like, I think, interesting context, because every single community that I play in has like a very different metagame environment. Like, for example, the Magic Club at the uni has this like everybody there kind of builds their own decks, but they are super, super focused on theme. Like, they will play basically no cards that are off theme. And at my local game store, which is still fairly new, there's a lot of precons. Like, there's a lot of new players, people that just kind of like have a precon or upgrade their precon. That's mostly it. But then at the restaurant, there's a lot of very well-established players that are always playing like high-power combo decks with their theme. They don't care about theme. They dare to win. And I think that makes like a really big difference, like kind of like where you play and who you play against, which like kind of shapes your understanding of the game. Because like even local metas, this is all in the same town, right? And it's not a big town. Even local metas make a huge difference on how you perceive Commander.
Yeah, I've just changed stores recently, and I was also really experiencing this sort of pod culture shock as well recently, where my old meta in SoCal was really strong. We had a lot of people who would play very optimized decks, and like I would see like a lot of reserve list cards hit the table, stuff like this. So removal to me is very important, as you could tell by my definition of what makes a color strong. But also, I am like extremely adverse to any permanent that costs like more than 4 mana. It's like disgusting to me. It's like eating broccoli. I like I cannot put a card that is that expensive into my deck, because when I get blown out by a 1 mana piece of removal, it's gonna hurt the mana disadvantage. So I always build typically like very low curve decks. And now that I'm playing in like a very more casual meta in my new game store, it's like my decks crush. They own, because I have super efficient curves where everyone else is like kind of doing some more janky stuff. Although they have wisened up to my play patterns now, and they have been countering me quite hard, which has been fun. Yeah, no, and back in my old game store, a lot of people used to like net deck and tweak decks that have been proven to work. Versus my new game store, it's a lot of people building their own new decks. Although last week I did play in a pod with 2 snail decks. Like two of my opponents had a deck that were featured on Snail's channel. One of them was from your deck building challenge with the backgrounds. It was the it was the white black. What's the white commander's name again? Ellen.
Ellen. That's
awesome.
It
was the untap tap one, and then my other opponent was playing Cabal, although he has deviated quite a bit from your list. He's on a doomsday pile now, which is really cool.
That's so good. I love that.
Yeah, and I love playing against people who are playing your decks, because I get to be like, I was there when these were fucking written. Like,
that's good.
You know, it was funny. But yeah, no, I've totally been feeling the commander culture shock, as you put it, with swapping pods and whatnot.
Do you find yourself ever interested in like making a weaker deck for playing with that people at that store? Because I always feel like if I'm winning too many games, or if I'm feeling like I'm a little too sweaty, I start to like reach for like some funkier sorts of cards that I can put together something funny with.
Yeah, to make it clear, I'm not like decimating or anything. Like, I get blown out quite frequently in my game store. Like, my decks aren't even close to CEDH. I do keep an unmodified Necron precon on me if I feel like it's a little too hot.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
I love to keep my unmodified precon on me just in case I need it.
So what Alex just mentioned is actually like an experience that I've had very specifically. When I originally started playing Commander, I started in that restaurant that I talked about, right? And again, there everybody's playing like high power combo, like they're trying to win very, very quickly. And that's pretty much the exact same experience at LCAT, where I looked at anything that costs 4 or more mana and I'm like, I just cannot play this. Like, if I play this, I will just lose the game. That's it. I need to be super aggressive. I need to be super low to the ground and so on. And then basically, that was when I started playing. That was kind of our only local community here. And then the Magic Club at the uni opened up, and I went there. And I'm just like, oh my God, my decks are not fun for anybody to play against, because they're full of these really fast, high-powered cards, and they don't really care that much about like what's going on from a thematic standpoint. And it has resulted in this kind of like environment where nobody else even really gets to play. So what I had to do is I had to take all of my decks and power them down until they're actually like at a point where other people were able to play against them. And it has resulted in me having way more fun with the game. Like, I think it's way more enjoyable to play at that lower power level where, you know, the matches do go into those later curves and where I can just play an 8 mana creature and be happy with it. Like, to me, that is more enjoyable. So, but yeah, I've had very much that experience of needing to specifically power down my decks. And I do keep decks around where I very intentionally, they are not good. I look at them and I'm like, this is not strong. Like, I have a Genku Flicker deck, which is the worst Flicker deck you have seen in your life, because Genku is not a good commander, but I like him a lot.
I love Genku.
But it's not strong, right? Like, it's cool, but it's not strong. And the thing is, like, I use that deck against precons, and that's what it's for. You know, if I'm at a table where everybody's playing precons, I play Genku because I know that, you know, I'm gonna go through 15 game actions to make 2 tokens that are 2/1 and flying, and that's gonna be it.
So I feel like we need to. How do we want to cap off what makes a color best?
Well,
like 20 minutes later.
Yeah, we need to kind of like hone in on the podcast theme here a little.
No, I feel like I said the definitions are going to take 45 minutes.
Well, no, the definitions were always going to be the main thing, right? Like, again, if we can fully define everything, then the answer is obvious. Then we don't even have to talk about anything else.
That's
And-
very true.
I mean, I was ready for this to be a 2-second podcast, you know, just define it and leave.
Yeah, the also I feel like something that's like kind of important to, like, I feel like we don't necessarily agree on this. Like, I hear your points and I see what you're saying, right? But for me personally, your definition.
So what you are saying, as in me, or
Well, I mean, you guys are more or less in agreement, no? Like, if
With what topic exactly?
So it feels like Elk and Trinket are kind of agreeing that it's mostly about diversity more so than other aspects of a color's power. Yeah.
That's where we've been going with what is like the definition of like what is required for a color to be considered the best. But my definition is a lot more simple, right? But I'm just saying whatever gives you the highest chance of winning. And now, of course, you might then say, okay, well, you know, how do you define that? Like, highest chance of winning? Like, what does that even mean? And of course, we can keep going down that path. And it's probably best to just kind of move on. But like, for me personally, I think having like a really simple, straightforward definition of that, if I play this color, I feel like I have the best chance of taking on a pod is, I don't know, works for me. Although ultimately, I think we are kind of differing on the specifics. I feel like we're actually not really that far apart in our core idea. Where I think the way you are looking at it is just like, okay, but I want to make sure that I'm always playing the game, and I want to make sure that I always have options for dealing with the game. And I think, to me personally, if I had to actually, like, that sounds like what is needed to win a game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, those are very close tangentially, but also I want to extend my thing as well to the diversity of wins that the deck has. Like, the more things that a color can do to win the game, the more interesting it is to me, right? And this is a fun factor sort of deal as well. And fun's going to be subjective, but I think the more things a color can do to win a game, just beyond just like I make creatures and hit you, is what makes a deck or makes a color particularly interesting as well.
yeah.
Okay, but like, I see what you're saying. But like, we're talking about what's the strongest color, right?
Yeah.
So I included like a handful of potential definitions and ordered them in the order of how much I like them. My second favorite is contains the widest array of decidedly viable strategies. I don't consider incremental mill to be typically viable. I think generally it needs to be more combo oriented or more based around like getting a really big creature with like Phoenix. So I think if a color can win a lot of ways and those wins are like actually likely to happen, like it's a pretty viable sort of win, I'm on board with that. I'm okay with that definition ish, even if it's not my like number one that I would go to.
I feel like we have kind of like tackled this from like a different perspectives now, and we can probably just kind of like move on.
Yeah.
I think we at least have an idea of where everybody is kind of coming from, sort of.
Exactly.
Before we go into the rest of the discussion, though, can I ask you like a question that might not seem super related, but like, I promise you there's a point.
Yeah, sure.
No,
No? Well,
Go
in
for
that case, I
I'm
won't.
kidding. Yeah.
So, something that you will often hear is that certain cards aren't allowed to be played in casual Commander, right? that players will get upset, that they have been kind of rule zeroed out of the game, and so on. And I wonder what that means to you. Like, where do you draw the line of getting players upset? Because this is a point that I have seen brought up very frequently. For example, in my video, I talked about playing these kind of like stacks pieces in your deck as white, as a way to kind of like shut down certain things. Like if you play Tutor Hate, or if you play stuff like the one spell per turn cards. Like, are those, and people said, oh, those are cards that you aren't allowed to play in Commander. Now, obviously, there's no Commander police, right? You're not going to jail because you played these cards. Instead, there is just kind of like feedback that you're getting at a table from the other players. And I always wonder what's kind of the line there. Because to me personally, if I'm sitting at a table and I play a card and then the other players complain about the card, I don't see that as a problem. Like, to me, players will always complain if they are not winning. This is just normal. Maybe that's got something to do with me being German and living in Germany, and people here are just a little bit more complainy, right? But if somebody just complains a little bit about the card that I played, I don't consider that to be an issue. I just say that that's fine, whatever. To me, the line is if people are literally just saying, I don't want to play against this, and then they're getting up to leave. Like, that is the line, when people literally just say, I would rather not play right now.
Yeah.
How do we tell him about the secret commander police? I know he's gonna defend
Oh no, did I?
it.
So I need to first things first say that playing Tutor Hate in your decks is based and righteous, and that's
Agreed.
really funny. I will never be salty if someone Aven mind censors me and I get caught.
Aven mind censor is
right?
so
Like,
funny.
I love that card to death. For me, I made an entire video about this. There's a 40-minute video sitting on my channel called What Even Is Casual like Commander? And it seems that the most popular line to draw was on MLD and like hard stacks pieces like a Winter Orb. So like mana denial that's like really hefty. That was the only major line, maybe. But this is the sort of thing that casual EDH is like best at, is because casual is really subjective. It is going to vary based on player to player. And this is the ultimate conclusion I sort of came to in that video, is that casual is just like anything that isn't competitive. And that can mean different things to everyone, which means it's like really just not a functioning definition at all. So sorry if that's unsatisfying, but it's true.
Yeah, I feel like, okay, like I feel like you're actually kind of going a step ahead. Like, Elk, where would you draw the line when you're sitting at a table and you play a card and people complain? Like, how much do they need to complain for you to feel like you cannot play this card?
Yeah, they would need to be like, oh, don't want to even play anymore or something like that. But to me, that registers more as like we're just on different wavelengths at what we think Commander's about. We might not even be compatible to play with each other, right? That's not even like a slight. Like, I'm not even like, I'm not pissed off at the guy or whatever, right? Like, oh, I'm not even going to play Commander with you ever. It's just like, we must have such cosmically different ideas of what a casual Commander deck is that it's probably just best if we don't play casual Commander together, right?
Yeah, I think it's like it's very, very rare that I run into that situation where I like play a card and somebody goes like, whoa.
Yeah, also true.
And
yeah, it's been a while.
And, you know, for whoever's in the comments or whatever, yes, this includes Mindslaver and Humility and all these other wacky, crazy cards that I play, because in the context of the deck, they are all well and good in my mid-power casual games. I assure you. Very rare that I have any like issues. Sometimes people will complain about like this or that. I don't know, maybe I'm just like a crazy person, but I am relatively confrontational when it comes to people like saying stuff like that. I have definitely had people complain about like Ensnaring Bridge is an example that comes to mind. And then I would literally ask them, hey, do you play artifact removal? If you don't, like, you should, and if they say that that is unreasonable, that they should have the ability to destroy an artifact in their deck, then I'm probably not going to want to play with them, because they're just going to give up at the first hurdle of anything. So it's, I don't know if it's like I would ever take it out of my deck or anything. Somebody complaining it's a very normal card.
That is
I'm not drawing the line at.
That's an incredible take.
Yeah, I'm not drawing the line at.
Sorry, I need to interrupt you. That is so funny. I like how you Uno reversed this. It's just like, I play Ensnaring Bridge, and if that makes you mad, I don't think I want to play with you because you got mad at my stacks piece.
Yeah. I think it's very fair. There is I'm always everyone should play everything that they want, right?
Yeah.
My whole channel has always been like anything goes. Like, if somebody says no tutors, but you think Imperial Seal has the coolest art in the game, then that is reason enough for you to put in your deck. Like you should have at it. There should be no thing. The only restriction is general power level that we want to try and match such that my deck does not crush yours. And my deck that has Ensnaring Bridge is, I don't even think I have it in the deck anymore, but I at one point did. And the deck is very, very, very slow. You have 4, 5, 6 turns to remove the bridge and attack me. I have very few creatures in the deck. You have plenty of time to do it. It's not like I play Ensnaring Bridge to save me for 1 turn and I win the game on turn 4 or whatever. So like the reasonableness in which that I play these cards, I think is in my opinion fine. And for a vast majority of games that I've played in Commander in general, I have very rarely had anyone complain about any of my decks.
Every card is like really like it's context dependent.
Exactly.
For me, like I don't know, I've gotten tilted off at because I played a Volcanic Offering and I blew up someone's Yavimaya with it. Do you guys know what Volcanic Offering is?
Yeah, it's a funky card.
It's bad. It's not a good card. I played that card. I blew up the Elves player's Yavimaya. Keep in mind they're on like reserve list Eladamri. They're about to Forest Walk kill everyone. I blow up their Yavimaya, and I get tilted off at because I played a 5-mana land destruction spell. So it's like I don't know. To some extent, like if we're all matching power level and we all know each other, there's just no reason to tilt off. And also, like even to some extent, like it's just a game,
I know there's nothing on the line. There's no stakes. Like we can chill out. Yeah.
But Elk, even in that example, did that player then get up and leave?
Damn close to it, at least threatening to scoop it to my face, which is not a healthy mindset to have about a card game.
No, it's not.
Yeah, exactly. So what do? I just play Avoidance. I just never played with that person again, and it worked out.
Yeah, exactly. That's what
like I said.
If they're like, I refuse to like have the ability in my deck to overcome any obstacle, I cannot do that. Then like I just don't want to play with you, because then like I could just play a bigger creature than yours and you'll complain. Like you won't be able to attack.
This is the beautiful thing about Commander 2 is like you can kind of, if you are in a position to pick with who you play with, it just works itself out. Because like, yeah, you might hate mass land destruction, for instance. I don't like mass land destruction. If I ran into someone who's just like Armageddon.deck, I just wouldn't want to play with that person, or at least not play against that deck. And I have the option to not do that. Like casual is like independent for each person, and it's like a curated experience based on who you play, right?
I feel like we haven't heard Snail's answer or hey, Snail chime in here in a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, I know. I tend to be more willing to play grittier reactive game plans than fast proactive game plans. I play a lot of soft stacks. I have like a couple of my main decks are very based around soft stacks, just like things that take away opponents' resources and let me kind of get an edge. Thankfully, I think my game store aligns with me quite well on this. The only rule for the mid-power pods basically is that you can't have like a infinite combo with like an especially low number of pieces in it, like 2 or 3 or something. You can't have an easy infinite. So there are people doing much nastier stuff than me. There's mass land destruction. I got stasis locked one time. So it's thankfully, I think I tend to play in an environment where people are typically more, they've been more exposed to that. Now, I do still have occasions where, there's a question of, do I feel right playing what I'm playing right now? I know I accidentally played a combo deck 8 months ago or so into a pod that was lower power than I thought, and I comboed off faster than I thought, and that felt kind of bad. But then there was another case where I was playing my Shroom Flicker deck, and somebody else was playing Wick, the World Mind, that creates a snail with counters on it. And so
you just keep flickering the snail.
Yes. And I was like, should I feel bad about this? And I don't know. I mean, I said sorry to the person after the game, but it was like more of a like, sorry, this matchup was kind of bad for you sort of thing. Cause like, I'm not going to not flicker the snail. They're threatening a lot of damage. They're threatening a lot of draw.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
This is the Farrakha problem for me, where I play Farrakha, God of Affliction, and like any graveyard deck where like a creature matters in the graveyard, you're not keeping it for long. It's going away, and it's from the command zone. It's such a brutal matchup, and like I don't play Farrakha like purposefully into people, and sometimes I'll just be like, I'm not gonna play Farrakha into that deck. It feels too mean, but like when it comes up, it's brutal.
I'm so the opposite. I think even if it's the other way around, like if you were playing, what's that guy that gives artifacts like an upkeep cost of 1?
Oh,
A War Wage? Kataki
yeah,
War
I
Wage?
love Kataki.
Kataki War's Wage, yeah.
Yeah. When I'm on like an artifact deck and you flip over like Kataki, I'm not switching commander decks. I'm just gonna like eat it and try my best to play around. It's like a challenge, you know?
I get that feeling
Like,
so much.
I have no problem with it. And you know what? Here's how I'm gonna give everybody a tip right now. Here's what you do. You play politics. Oh, I can't do anything. There's no need to attack me. The Kataki's holding me back. And then you just like sit there and nobody uses removal on your crap because you don't play anything. And you just wait and you small bean your way throughout the whole game. And then they kill the Kataki player, and then you just pop off because nobody's removed your things. You got to hold all your best cards in hand the whole game.
No, I don't know about that part. Like, honestly, if I'm in that kind of situation, I just fucking take the L.
Yeah, I was about to say, man, just like tell that to the Haken player when I'm playing Farrakha, right? Haken Stromgold Sturge, like you can play the Knights from the graveyard if he's in the graveyard.
Like, I have definitely played my terrible mill deck into other better mill decks. And I'm just like, oh, I'm just helping you. Cool. I don't know. I just think that's funny.
I'm definitely of the opinion. Oh shit, I forgot what I was gonna say. Oh no.
Well, I'm sure you have an opinion.
I do. Sorry, I got lost thinking about how funny it is to play against two weaker, stronger mill decks with a mill deck.
That's okay. We'll have Yusuf cut this section. Yusuf, cut that bit.
Make
fine.
sure
That's fine.
that Snail seems
Move on.
smart. We need to keep up the image.
I cut so many ums and uhs from
I have an
like, the
image to maintain.
podcast. Oh my goodness, it's crazy. People would think we have like a like a brain tumor.
I remember what I was going to say. I am very much of the opinion, and I hold two opinions at the same time. I hold the opinion that I like it when people are able to play the game, when people are able to do roughly what they want to do. But I am also of the opinion that people should be controlling what their opponents want to do and should be kind of, keeping people in check. And so I think the confluence of this is that if somebody with kind of a vulnerable deck with some weaknesses to certain types of interaction has a bad game, like I want to reduce that as much as possible. And I want to reduce that by encouraging that person to make their deck more resilient, make their deck better against that sort of thing.
Yes.
I encourage improvement. I want to help them.
Yes, exactly. You should
Just build a better deck, moron.
I'm just trying to help you. I didn't fair value to clear your board. I did it so you become a better player.
You would not have lost if your deck was better.
But this is true. Losses should be learning opportunities. Places when you see a weakness in your deck, you shouldn't just chalk it up to a bad matchup. You should think about, well, if my deck has this weakness, is there any way to alleviate that? And it doesn't even have to be your deck literally changing cards. It could be the way you play, holding back a little bit more, sandbagging it a bit more, making more political deals, etc., right? Like, you should take losses as learning opportunities and improve your deck over time. Your deck is not perfect the first time you build it, as much as you would love to think so. Every deck, in its first draft has flaws of some sort, and you should be recognizing those flaws in your losses.
Colorless player when a fucking Void Mirror hits the stack.
Void Mirror, bro. But I mean, okay, like I'm not saying that like you can build a very resilient graveyard deck, and somebody could play a Rest in Peace on turn 2, and you could still have a difficult game. But like, it is Magic the Gathering. There is some amount of randomness, and you have 3 random opponents drawing from a random pile of cards. Not every game is going to be perfect. You literally cannot do that.
Yeah. To be clear, I don't 100% want to just like smush somebody to teach them a lesson. Like I don't see people's decks and want to teach them a lesson necessarily. I would like them to make a better deck. but I think that I like to stop short of feeling like this kind of vindictive, ooh, that deck has some issues, I'm gonna punch them as hard as I can with my stacks and knock some sense into them.
No, it is 100% righteous and just to find your local flicker player and put a torpor orb on the table.
I like to I like to approach people with.
Can I?
Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, like, I kind of get where you guys are coming from. And I think that makes a lot of sense given the context of like this kind of community and the kind of people that you play with and the kind of people that you are. But from my experience, there are a very significant number of Commander players that show up once a week, they play, and that's their interaction with the game. And for those people, if you show up and they're playing a Flicker deck and you put a torpor orb, on the table, then they just don't get to play that week.
See, but here's the thing. Here's the thing is if you only play one game a week, one game a month, one game a year, whatever, and you want that game to go well, the only thing you control, right? Literally the only thing you control is the cards in your deck, right? Which is why ultimately, and every player is going to eventually learn this one day, the most fun part of your deck is removal. And the reason for that is it lets you remove the things that stop you from playing the other parts of your deck. And the sooner you learn that lesson, and the more you can then get rid of a torpor orb, the more fun games of Magic you're gonna have, right? Ultimately, if you're playing with random people at a local game store, you can't control what's on their deck.
I feel like I can't agree with this at all. Because like
I used to be where you're from, Bommy, where it's like, yes, there's people who are like not as in tune with the game as the people listening to this podcast. By definition, listening to this podcast makes you far more into Magic than like I would say 60 at least % of people playing Magic. That being said, they have like a wife and kids, a family, a job, and they come in and they're like, I'm gonna blow off some steam and play some Magic. Here's the thing. You need to be able to take those punches with a smile. And it's just because it's a game and it's meant to be fun. And if you face an interactive thing or like something like that stonewalls your game plan, you need to find a way around it. And that's just like the bar to entry for Commander in a way. I think the best way to handle this is with communication outside of the game. Like, hey man, that card really hoses me and it really like mucked up that game for me. And then like you can have a back and forth. You can talk about what removal's better. They're learning the game from outside conversations about the game you guys just had. I mean, it just comes down to communication, really.
Hello, editing Trinket, future Trinket here. I just wanted to say that we kind of started rambling a lot in this section of the podcast when we talk about like power levels and stuff. And then it suddenly became out of date because brackets came out like now while we're working on the podcast.
Yep. The beta for brackets is out. Sadly, Snail isn't here with us to discuss the brackets with us, but me and Con are both here to give some preliminary thoughts, and we'll go into a deeper dive almost assuredly in a future podcast episode.
Yes. We're going to have the link to the full article in the description, but let's just start real quick. I'm going to read off the brackets right now. So there's 5 brackets of power level where you place your Commander decks. One is Exhibition, which is ultra casual, no mass land denial or extra turns, no 2-card infinite combos, no game changers, we'll get into that in a second, and few tutors. Bracket 2 is no mass land denial, no chaining extra turns as opposed to no extra turns, period, no 2-card infinite combos, no game changers, few tutors. 3 is no mass land denial, no chaining extra turns, late game 2-card infinite combos are allowed, and then 3 game changers. 4 is no restrictions other than the ban list, and 5 is no restrictions other than the ban list, but it is CEDH, meaning you are adhering to the CEDH meta and you're playing the tippity top of power level. To see what the meta is, I would recommend going to like EDH Top 16. That website has a good showing of what the meta decks are. So what are game changers that are mentioned? Game changers are just powerful, big, splashy cards that they have listed as like key pieces. So, for example, Bolus's Citadel is a game changer. Cyclonic Rift is a game changer. There's a whole list of them. We'll put them on screen. Also, you can check them out in the article, link in the description.
Yeah, so overall, I like the bracket system.
Me too.
Yeah, the beta that they've put out is very solid. I think there are a couple places where I have there's a hole for me, or like something that I don't quite agree with. But as a whole, as like the first 1.0, because keep in mind, they're accepting feedback. This is not like how things are. This is not a hard set of rules. 1.0 feels pretty nice. I think I want to talk a little bit more about that too, by the way, just like what brackets are meant for. This is not meant for like rules enforcement in like everyone's like casual normal friend group pods. This isn't going to affect you at all. What this is for like Magic the Gathering conventions or new local game stores, a way to get a quick litmus test of what everyone is playing. I like, so going to a Magic Con, there's a bunch of random people that you've never met before. Them being able to say, yeah, I'm bracket 3, but I'm not running all the game changers that bracket 3 would allow me to. Or I'm bracket 2, but I have one that's on the game changers list, but I'm a Merfolk deck. It's just Thassa's Oracle, and I'm not playing it to combo or anything, right? Things like this, it's just to incentivize discussion amongst popular pieces between players. And I think the way that they've sort of put that forward is actually going to work out pretty well.
I agree. I think that like compared to the original like teaser of what they said, where it's gonna have like 4 different like lists of cards or whatever, this is like 100 times better. It is so much better. And I love that this is something that Gavin Verhey mentioned on his video about it, is you can kind of put it into 3 categories of like no game changers, 3 game changers, as many game changers. And I think that's actually kind of good. I think that it sort of fits the like low, middle, high, like power level. Because if you have like 1 Cyclonic Rift in your precon, it wouldn't become a bracket 4 deck or whatever, like the old system was. So with this, it works better.
Yeah. What I really like about this too is that it fixes 2 problems at once. A lot of people were bemoaning like the random bans out of nowhere. Wizards of the Coast, they mostly do things at random. This is an adage that is true for most formats. But for Commander, at least with the Game Changers list, you kind of have like an idea of a watch list. Like these cards are at risk of being banned. Like
Whoa, wait.
Gavin Verhey mentioned on the stream that this doubles as a watch list for like, hey, listen, these are high risk cards.
Oh, wait, I thought he said the opposite. Am I crazy?
No. He said exactly this. He said them being game changers, as it were, does not necessarily mean that they will be banned. But if there is a ban, it's likely to be off of this list. That is his words. It gives a little forewarning, but do not mince my words here. This is not a ban list announcement sort of deal. This is not what it is at all. But Gavin did say that, hey, like it is possible that if we have bans in the future, it will be off of this list. But it's not exclusive. It just gives like a little hint, maybe.
Yeah, in the article, it does say, to be clear, most of these are unlikely to be banned. So you don't sell all of your expropriates in fear of it getting banned.
Exactly. Yeah, these cards are not likely to be banned. It's just that if bans are to happen, they're likely going to be off of this list. I actually like the list overall. There's a couple of question mark head scratchers for me, but I'm sure everyone looks at this list and they feel the same way about a certain number of cards, or why isn't this card on there? Like everyone's gonna have their own opinion about I've heard it be called a soft ban list before, which I think is actually a very apt name for it. Because you can't play these cards basically in bracket 1 or 2 if some people are sitting down, or at least you have to announce that you're playing these cards.
Yeah.
Like, right. Like that's the exact thing too, is like, you're not forbidden from playing these cards in bracket 1 and 2. You just have to say like, hey, listen, I'm running a card that's on the list. Is that cool with everyone? Like it just enables pregame discussion. Anyway.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, one card that I think is kind of interesting that it's not listed as a game changer is Farewell. Do you feel like it should have been?
Yeah, I like Farewell on this list, mostly just because it is very hard to interact with in the same way that a Cyclonic Rift is. If you put it in the right kind of deck, it very much functions like a Cyclonic Rift, where it's like, okay, I'm playing an enchantment deck or an artifact deck. I just don't name that mode on Farewell, and I keep all my busted artifacts, or I keep all my busted enchantments, and you guys don't. I think when a board wipe's only counter is a Teferi's Protection, that's when I think it should be thought about going on the list. And it's asymmetrical as well, which Farewell checks both of those boxes.
Yeah. That's the only thing that I think is missing. Oh, unless you have something else.
I think Teferi's Protection should be on the list.
Yeah, Teferi's Pro was like kind of crazy, but I feel like, here's the thing about Teferi's Pro is unlike Farewell, where if I'm just playing like an enchantment deck and artifact deck, Farewell is like a crazy one-sided board wipe almost. With like Teferi's Pro, if I'm playing like a pretty weak deck, I don't know if I can turn Teferi's Pro into like such a game winner unless someone's casting a Farewell for all modes and I'm like tagging on to that. That's like the only like situation, you know. I feel like it's much more defensive.
Yeah, it is a lot more defensive. I think where Teferi's protection starts to become a little bit egregious to me is it's just like it protects your life total while also phasing out your board. Guardian of Faith doesn't do that, right? Like Cyclonic Rift will still get you. Like if they have a board to swing at you with, if they Cyclonic Rift you, right? Whereas the Teferi's protection saves you from the Alpha Strike. So, you know, I think Teferi's protection starts to push it. I would like to see them go on the ban list together. The ban list, the
game changer list.
The game changer list together. Whenever I hear game changer, by the way, I think of the Dropout show with Sam Reich and everyone, like Sam Reich and all them. Game changers is such a funny name for it. Anyway, sorry.
Is there anything you think is on the game changer list that you think you would remove?
I have some soft pushback to Bolas's Citadel. Keep in mind, this is because I fucking love the card. So I'm really biased, but also just Tinker isn't in the format, right? That's what really pushes Bolas's Citadel over the edge in Vintage and other formats is the fact that Tinker exists where it doesn't exist in Commander. I think Bolas's Citadel is a fine card. It comes down on turn 6, unless of course you're dark ritualing it or whatever. Overall, I think it's fine. It needs a lot of support to actually like storm off, right? It becomes a 3-card combo. With Top and Aetherflux Reservoir, right? Which is totally fine for bracket 3. And then I guess suppose at that point, if you are in bracket 3, then you're running game changers already, quote unquote, because you're allowed up to 3 in bracket. So yeah.
Yeah, I actually really dislike Bolas's Citadel in Casual EDH.
I love Bolas's Citadel.
I feel like it leads to so many games where they're like Citadel, flip, 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 and they just like win the game.
I know, but the flips off the top are fun for me.
Yeah, I mean, like it, you know, it can be exciting. I don't know. I don't like Bolas. I feel like to me, Sarah's Sanctum is kind of the weirdest one here.
Sarah's Sanctum, I think it's because it's a big reserve list card too. It's just like, I kind of agree with it tentatively. This all being said, I think the biggest head scratcher for me isn't Bolas's Citadel. Like I can get some arguments for why Bolas's Citadel should be on the list, but for me, Breach, Underworld Breach is really weird to me. Let me prove my point a little bit. Underworld Breach can be very good. Like it's a broken combo piece. Absolutely. With Brain Freeze, with Wheel of Fortune, with Lion's Eye Diamond. Yeah, exactly. But I think those are the problem cards, not the Breach.
I agree. Oh my God. So I've had this same exact conversation with other people where I'm like sharing my like mono red like Grenzo list and they're like, oh, you have Underworld Breach. It's crazy. It's like, no. Like, you don't understand. This isn't like a Spellslinger deck. This isn't like a combo deck. Like the Breach is literally like...
Yeah, you can value Breach. Value Breach is a totally reasonable line of play.
It's like an Eternal Witness. Yeah. I just cast like 3 creatures from my graveyard.
Yeah,
like,
no, just go like Mishra's Bauble, Mishra's Bauble, and then you're like, okay, I just drew 3 for like 9 cards in my graveyard, right? For 2 mana, which is like, that's not an absurd card. So the reason why I'm saying Breach, by the way, for those typing comments, hang on, Basalt Monolith isn't in the Game Changers list.
Yes, and Basalt Monolith is a pretty crazy card. I mean,
I think Basalt Monolith is more egregious of a combo starter than Breach is.
I agree because in Casual, a lot of the Breach combos involve Lion's Eye Diamond, which is this big reserve list piece that a lot of Casuals don't use or don't have access to. So I see more combos with Basalt Monolith than I do with Breach because it's easier to get the pieces for it.
Yeah, like Forensic Gadgeteer plus Basalt Monolith, that's infinite mana and mono blue. Gadgeteer also makes clues whenever you cast an artifact spell. Really easy to do with infinite colorless mana, right? So,
yep.
I think Basalt Monolith should be on and not Breach, just because like it's the same kind of thinking. And I think LED should be on instead of Breach as well.
Oh no, LED is on, right?
LED isn't on, I don't think.
Lion's Eye Diamond, yeah, it is under colors, right?
Okay, great. Then just take Breach off. Like literally, I think Breach is like totally fair game. If someone has Breach and Lion's Eye Diamond, that's the thing. If someone just has Breach as a value card, they shouldn't be sitting at a bracket tube table going like, listen guys, I know I have an Underworld Breach in this deck, but I'm running it as a value card and not as a combo card. Right? Like that pregame discussion's a little bit weird to me. Whereas instead it would just be like, oh yeah, I have Lion's Eye Diamond in my deck, so I should probably be moved up a bracket. Versus like also like people using Lion's Eye Diamond quote unquote fairly. You can see the air quotes I'm doing. Like if you're playing a flashback deck or Hacken, I guess. It's like kind of broken in Muldrotha. That's where I like really feel it. But like you should be rule zeroing the Lion's Eye Diamond, which actually makes the breach broken. And then like
It's also odd
yeah,
that like Breach, right, is on this list, but Yawgmoth's Will isn't, which if you're counting a fair breach, like a fair Yogg's Will is basically the same thing. And Yogg's Will also leads to all sorts of shenanigans.
breach is the real head scratcher for me, not really Bolas the Citadel. Like I understand some arguments for Bolas the Citadel. I just love that card. The tear streaming down my cheek. Don't ban it, Wizards.
3 is going to be the new 7.
Yeah, I think that's gonna have a little bit of issue.
Yeah, I think my only other like issue is just initially looking at my deck lists. My Mina and Den list is a 3, whereas like my Heliod deck is a 4 because it has 4 game changers instead of 3 or less. But my Heliod deck is way worse than Mina and Den, so I wish somewhere in this bracket thing they had something about like average. It's kind of hard to like exactly quantify this, but like average amount of mana by turn, I don't know, 4, right? Because the problem is I can go like land, exploration, land, ramp, or explosive vegetation turn 2, and then untap like 6, 7 mana on turn 3.
Yeah. In my lands deck, I've gone infinite with Kura on like turn 4, right? So
And it's like that's like a bracket 1 technically, and obviously anybody can like angle shoot or like come up with quirky ways to make stronger decks or whatever. But like what I'm trying to say is like turbo land ramp is not accounted for very well in these brackets. So I think that those decks are going to feel more like bracket 4 type decks than they are going to feel like 2s and 3s. And maybe something should be added in there for that. That'd be my only like big change. You can, the game changers list is like mostly fine, but that's the change out.
Yeah, I actually really like the game changers list overall, besides the few like head scratchers. The thing that I have issue with is the chaining extra turns prevention. Like, so the example is given of like Edric Spymaster of Trest, like a deck like that or Narset would not be like bracket 3 playable because it's just unfun to play against. Not really necessarily even because of power. I agree with that. I think I'm fine with not letting the person go like infinite with extra turns, or not infinite per se, but like go non-deterministic with extra turns. But I would really like if there was a clause in there for infinite turns, because at that point it's just a combo. And
Yes.
I could see like a really awkward conversation happening because bracket 3 combos are allowed,
Bracket 2 combos are allowed.
but chaining extra turns isn't. If you have infinite turns, in my opinion, that should be under the definition of combo and not chaining extra turns. And I would really like if that clarity was put in there, because here's what happens when I chain extra turns. I'm like, I hit you, there's a chance I whiff. I hit you, there's a chance I whiff. This is like with Narset, right? Or
Yeah.
with Edric. With an infinite turn that's deterministic, let's say a Magistrate Scepter, where I proliferate the counters on it every turn 100% of the time. I'm hitting you with Thrumming Bird. I put 2 counters on it. I Nesting Grounds a counter from another charge mana rock over. That's 3 counters a turn guaranteed every single turn. What's going to happen is I'm going to pick up my entire deck and I'm going to show you my Blue Sun Zenith, and I'll say we're good. Like at that point, it's just deterministically like I'm going to make you draw your whole deck.
Yeah. Which I think is totally fine at like 3 or 2 or whatever. Like, if you have your 10 card infinite turn combo, it should be fine. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like in this sort of instance, I'm totally happy with that at bracket 3. But it's not like chaining extra turns. I would just like that little bit of clarity, like, hey, listen, infinite turns are a combo and not like a thing. It's like calling Bruvac plus Traumatize mill. That's not mill. It's just a 2-card combo.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so those are our initial thoughts on brackets. What do you think of brackets? Let us know what you think of our proposed changes to the brackets. Tell us in the comments below. Next week's podcast will probably be much more in depth on brackets. I'm very excited about that because I'm not going to be there. So I'm curious to see what you and Snail come up with to talk about brackets.
Yes, we'll probably have a guest or two as well.
Hopefully, yeah. Thank you all for watching and listening to this very chaotic, disjointed episode. We'll try to make it a little bit more organized in the future.
Yeah, it got a little hectic this one. Thank you all for listening.